Please remember that the complete information for the class that you are about to view is at elithecomputerguy.com. Not only do we have our videos there, but we have part lists, diagrams, pictures, and even complete code examples. So if you are watching this video and you want more information, please go to elithecomputerguy.com. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and in today's class, I'm going to show you how to use opacity using CSS. So this basically says whether or not you can see through something that you're putting into your HTML document. So you will most likely have noticed this with images, and especially with text overlay on images. If you go to take a look at modern HTML documents, if you go take a look at a modern HTML document and there is a text overlay, usually you can see a little bit through the text that is overlaying the image. So I showed in a previous class how you can overlay text over an image and have a background color. Well, if you don't use the opacity setting, basically that text and that background color is big and bold, and it's a little bit jarring, right? You have this nice pretty image in the background, and then you have this big, bold, jarring text. So one of the things you can do is you can use the opacity setting to basically make that text and make that background color just a little bit see-through. So it kind of melds into the image a little bit, makes the user experience a little bit better for the people that are going to be viewing your images with a text overlay. The other thing you can do with the opaque setting is for things such as hover when people are going to your HTML document. So let's say you have a gallery, and the gallery has a whole bunch of different images that are hyperlinks. One of the things that you can do to improve the user experience is when somebody basically hovers over one of those images, you can either make it more bold or maybe you can tone it down a little bit, basically just to show that this is the image that the person is hovering over so that they know what they're doing when they click on the image. So these are some of the things you can be thinking about with the opacity setting with CSS. So with that, let's go over to the computer and I can show you how opacity works in CSS on your HTML documents. So here we are back on my demonstration machine. Again, I'm using a MacBook, so I use TextEdit in order to write this code, but all you need is a basic ASCII text editor. So if you're in the Windows world, you can use Notepad. In the Mac world, you can use TextEdit. If you're in the Linux world, you can use gedit, Nano, Vim, whatever you want. We have two files today. So for the style sheet, we have something called opacity style.css. And then for the HTML document, this is what we'll actually be opening up with the web browser. I just have this called opacity.html. This can be called whatever you want as long as it ends with either .htm or .html. Now, before I actually go and take a look at the code that I wrote today, let's go at first and take a look at the demonstration. So basically, this is the demonstration web page that I've created. And so the first thing that I did is I've just shown you what the different opacity levels do for an image. So for the first image that you're seeing here, this has no opacity. So this is the normal image. Then we go down to a 0.8 opacity, then we go down to a 0.5 opacity, and then we go down to a 0.2 opacity. So this just kind of shows you basically, again, how you can tone down an image. So if you're looking at an image like this and you're like, I don't know, for the page that I've created, that seems a little bright, a little bit too bold, maybe you can simply modify the image using opacity. Again, maybe you want something a little bit lighter or a little bit lighter, or maybe even like ghostly in the background. Then beyond that, we have basically opacity with just basic text. So again, this is just where we're toning down text a little bit, if that's the type of thing that you want to do. And then finally, we have an image here where you have that see-through text. See how with the text and the text block, you can actually basically see through it a little bit. Basically, that back image comes through. Again, that's a little easier on the eyes. The other thing that I've done here, which is kind of interesting, is basically I've used the hover in CSS. So now when I hover over an image, it then has a 0.7 opacity. So this first image at the top here, this has just no opacity setting to begin with. And then when I hover over it, see it dims down a little bit. When I go to the 0.8 and then I hover over it, it changes a little bit. I go down here. So with this, This here is actually a zero point 0.2 opacity normally. So when I hover over it, it actually goes up to a 0.7 opacity. And so again, this is a way you can have a little bit of user interactivity. Basically make your web page just a little bit dynamic using just basic CSS. Again, we go down here and then we go down to this final image here. And again, imagine if this final image here is like in a gallery and you're using it as a link. So somebody can hover over it and they know, okay, I know I'm hovering over this image, and then they can click on it because they have more confidence there. So with that, let's go over and take a little look at the code. The first thing we'll do is we'll just take a look at the basic HTML code here. There's not much to it. Again, you're going to open up the HTML. You're going to open up the head. You're going to link to the style sheet. The style sheet, again, we're using is opacitystyle.css. So you'll either put in the name for the style sheet here. If it's in the same folder as the HTML document, if it's in a different folder, then you would put in the full file path to the style sheet. Past that, you're going to close the head, you're going to open the body. And then basically all I've done here is I have 4 IMG tags to the image. So I'm reusing that picture 700 JPEG that I use for almost all of these examples. The first time that I reference that image, I'm not going to do anything to it. So basically I'm not going to be modifying the opacity. I'm just going to be using whatever the CSS is for the image tag. Past that, we're going to use whatever we have for the image tag, plus I'm going to have a class of opacity 0.8. Then next, I'm going to have an opacity of 0.5. Then I'm going to have an opacity of 0.2. So these are classes that I created within the style sheet, and we'll take a look at that in a second. Then I have an H1 here. The class is text opacity. So basically, I just modified the class text opacity. Then this gives you a bit of see-through text. Then past that, we're going to go down, and basically, I'm going to create that image overlay like I did in our previous example. So for here, I have a div of a class of text overlay. So essentially I'm creating a canvas so that I can overlay the text, so I can add an image and overlay the text. Then I'm going to add the image, so image src, again that same picture 700 like I normally use, and then I'm going to have an h2 with a class of overlay hyphen title, and so this is going to create that see-through text that we're going to be looking at. So with that, let's go over and take a look at the CSS. Maybe this will make a little bit more sense when you take a look at it. And these are the classes that I created for this particular example. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to within CSS define the image tag or the IMG tag or the IMG element. The first thing that I want to do is I want to restrict, or I want to constrain the size of the image. So I'm simply going to put it to width of 100% and height to auto. So what this means is when I simply put the image on the page, it is going to fill up the entire web browser. And then when I put the image within a div, it's going to fill up the div. So this is a way, by simply putting 100%, I can just very easily have that image dynamically resize itself to basically whatever container I'm putting it in. Then past that, again for IMG hover, so we're using the image tag, the image element. When I hover over it, so this all has to be one thing. So white space matters when you're doing this. So you do IMG hover, and so then all I'm simply doing here is I'm setting the opacity to 0.7 semicolon and closing. So basically what that means is when I hover over an image, whatever its initial opacity is, when I hover over it, it'll go to 0.07. So for here, this image, there is no opacity setting, so you get the full image, right? When I hover over it, it tones it down a little bit. On the other hand, with this image here, this image, the default is an opacity of 0.2, so when I hover over it, it actually makes it darker. So there. Then we go through and we take a look. Again, I created classes for opacity. So I have a class for opacity 08, and simply I made this opacity 8. Opacity 05, here I set the opacity to 0.5. Then here I did opacity 02. That puts the opacity to 0.2. If we go take a look, that's the examples that we see here. So this is the initial image. This first image is the initial image without any opacity setting. Then this is an opacity at 0.08. Then this one here is an opacity of 0.5. And then this is an opacity of 0.2. So that just gives you a basic example of what the opacity setting looks like. Then we're going to go down here, a text opacity. I simply set that to opacity 0.5 with a background color of gray. And so again, we can take a look at this, and this is what we get. If you just have the text over a plain background, you're probably not going to see very much. We can go here, maybe we can modify this a bit. We can go to 0.8, do File, do Save. If we go here, refresh, now we can see it becomes a little bit darker. So again, that gives you a little bit of an idea what's going on there. Past that, we're then going to go down, and again, we're going to do that text overlay. So the first thing that we have to do for the text overlay is basically we have to create a div. We have to create a canvas that we're then going to put the image in, and then we're going to overlay the text over. So the text overlay, this is basically just creating that canvas. Position is going to be relative. Width is going to be 300 pixels, so that gives us a 300 pixel size here. Then the height is going to be auto, margin hyphen left is auto, margin hyphen right is auto. All that's going to do is then center the image, right? So that is basically creating the canvas for us. So that's creating a div that we can then put the image in. Then within the HTML, right? So we have this div, so that's what we created here with this class. We then put the image in. We then are going to write text. It's going to then have the class of overlay title. So we're going to go take a look at the class of overlay title. Position here is going to be absolute, because position, basically with this, we have to say where we're going to start writing the text. We are going to start writing the text from 0 pixels from the top and 16 pixels from the left, basically for the default for whatever tag we're using for H1. The color is going to be black. The background color is going to be light gray. But here, what we did different than the example that I showed you before with overlaying text is now we're going to have an opacity of 0.7. By having that opacity of 0.7, when we go and we take a look, at the text, we can see that it's now a little bit see-through. Again, it's not so jarring. If I go and let's say I took away that opacity, so let's say we go and instead of having the opacity of 0.7, I simply got rid of the opacity. I hit File, I hit Save. When we go back, right, that's how the text looks now. When I refresh, now you can see it's kind of like bold, bright, right in your face. It doesn't feel like it seamlessly integrates with the image underneath. So that's one of the reasons opacity can be very valuable for doing text overlays. So that's a basic example of how the opacity works. Again, the syntax for it is simply opacity colon and then 1. Basically, you can't see through it at all. 0, you can completely see through it. So again, you can go 0.2, 0.5, 0.8, 0.7, so on and so forth. You figure out what looks best for whatever it is that you're trying to do. And again, one of the cool things you can do with this is using things like hover. Basically, that's a way so that the image or whatever somebody is hovering over can be defined a little bit more easily. So now you know how to use opacity with CSS. Again, this can be very valuable for you if you're doing image galleries that are going to be links. So people can simply, scroll through, they can hover over an image, they know exactly what image that they're about to click on, and then they can click on it. It makes for a far better user experience. Also using opacity for text overlay. Again, as you saw, for a lot of people, they think having that text be a little bit translucent, being able to see through the text just a little bit, makes it a little easier on the eyes, makes it seem like the text and the image more go together. So again, it can give a little bit better of a user experience. And so this is one of those valuable things in CSS and something that you need to be thinking about. A lot of these very small, very easy to use settings can have a very significant impact on your UX for your users. Again, when your user goes, they're going to be interacting with your HTML document or your web application. Simply having images change the opacity setting based off of hover or things like that can make it a lot easier for your users to be able to navigate through your site or your web application. As always, I enjoyed doing this class and look forward to seeing you at the next one. If you like the content that I create, please think about going to elithecomputerguy.com and becoming a member or donating. Please understand that all of the educational videos are in front of the paywall. That includes the videos, that includes the notes, the diagrams, and the code example. All of that is freely available and in front of the paywall. But if you want to watch opinion videos or if you want to be able to comment, you do need to become a member. Membership is $5 a month or $60 a year and gives you access to those opinion videos and the ability to comment. If you don't want to become a member, you just want to give a one-time donation, there's also a donate button where you can do that. Please understand, in order to provide the education that I am, it does cost money. Servers cost money, equipment costs money, travel costs money. All of these things cost a reasonable amount of money, and the fact of the matter is YouTube's advertising program no longer supports creators the way that it used to. So if you want these classes to continue to stick around and you find them to be valuable, please think about either becoming a monthly member or donating a few dollars for this project.